Share. Ooh, look at this. Share. All right. Prayers at the beginning of teaching. Namo Guru Me. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Guru. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Guru. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sanghaya. Here is a ground anointed with incense and strewn with flowers, with Mount Meru adorned by the four continents, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha field. I offer it to the merit field. May all beings partake of a supremely pure Buddha field. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala To the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until enlightenment. By the merit of listening to the Dharma, may I achieve Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. All right, so in the last session, we finished up the discussion about emptiness and shared some ideas about how to meditate on emptiness in the course of a busy day, how to apply it to our daily lives. And then we began the discussion about of the destructive emotions. We talked a little bit about anger and fear and attachment. And so in this class, we're going to finish up the discussion about how to understand and relate to the emotions, negative emotions in particular. And so I wanted to actually start with a quote from Alexander Berzin's very, very interesting discussion about the primary minds and 51 mental factors, which just very briefly defines mind, definition of mind, and how that relates to the sense of self. So this is a sort of a bridge between the last class and this class. And the purpose of sharing this is to kind of set the context for helping us better understand how we relate to our emotions. So according to the Buddhist definition, mind is mere clarity and awareness and refers to the individual subjective mental activity of experiencing things. Clarity means giving rise to cognitive appearances of things, similar to mental holograms. And awareness refers to cognitively engaging with them. Mere implies that this occurs without a separate, unaffected, monolithic me that is either controlling or observing this activity. The I exists, but merely as an imputation based on a continuity of ever-changing moments of experiencing ever-changing things. So that's something that we've talked about in some of the previous sessions, but it's really important in terms of not, I think, mistaking how we relate to our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions, because we need to keep in mind that, there is no, as the quote, points out, that there is no monolithic me. There's no independent, permanently, inherently existing me that is controlling or observing this continually changing consciousness, this mind stream of ever-changing moments of consciousness, right? So what we're trying to do in terms of better relating to our feelings, our thoughts, and emotions is to, this is kind of a joke. We're trying to get rid of our old habits, right? So it's out with the old habits and in with the new. We're ringing in the new year with new habits, right? So the root of our old negative habits of mind is, everybody yell at the same time, yell it out, right? Ignorance. Ignorance. And the problem with ignorance is that it gives rise to temporary negative emotions, which give rise to negative behavior or non-virtuous actions, right? So instead, we want to be able to cultivate the root of positive feelings and emotions. So that would be, everybody remember this? The uncovering and being able to experience the innate, subtle mind of clear light. Okay. Being able to do so gives rise to endless positive emotions. It cuts the ignorance that we are clouded over by. It cuts ignorance at the root. And by doing so, it enables us to rid ourselves of negative emotions and all of the ensuing suffering, not just temporarily, but forever. And so His Holiness the Dalai Lama, in the text, The Approaching the Buddhist Path, continues this discussion, again, talking about the nature of the mind and relating that to the afflictions. He says, the fundamental nature of the mind is pure and stable. The innate subtle mind of clear light, which is the basis of the cultivation of positive states of mind, is stable in that it continues eternally without interruption. While afflictions have powerful antidotes that can destroy them, no such counteracting forces exist that can eliminate constructive emotions and attitudes forever. They're based on accurate perception and thus can be continually enhanced. Furthermore, the nature of the mind is such that once we become thoroughly habituated to these virtuous states, we don't need to make repeated effort to cultivate them. They will continue on limitlessly. So that's the good news. So afflictions can be overcome, and we can and should make a conscious effort to do so, to eradicate these negative emotions. And yet, as we strive to cultivate virtuous emotions, constructive emotions, then the good news is that once we become habituated to these states of mind, then they can continue on forever, limitlessly. They can just grow and grow and grow and expand and increase forevermore. And it becomes, easier and easier and easier to be able to expand those states of mind, right? Okay. So keeping all of that in mind, then the chapter talks a lot about offers specific advice. And the theme here is essentially how to be happier in a nutshell, right? So how do we develop these positive mental states of mind in order to overcome our innate negative tendencies? That's what I think the advice is all about. And so so what I've tried to do is to read the chapter and just kind of pull out some of the key points that have been made. And so the authors talk about how we can use mindfulness meditation in order to use the rhythm of the body, the feelings that the body experiences, in order to detect the negative thoughts, negative vibration, maybe, the negative thoughts and emotions early on. And rather than waiting until, we're in the midst of conflagration of emotions, being instead able to detect them when they're still in their initial stages. And then being able to consciously practice cultivating these positive emotions in order to counteract the negative thoughts and emotions. So all of that can be achieved through practicing mindfulness meditation in a consistent manner. And then, but that alone, is not enough. We also need to be able to rely on our intelligence and our ability to reason and analyze, our ability to study how these negative emotions are connected to, how are they related to, how do they arise from ignorance. Right? And so the authors write, His Holiness writes, deliberately, we need to be able to deliberately cultivate accurate perspectives in order to increase the strength of constructive emotions, right? So there's that sense of deliberately, engaging in study and analysis in order to be able to truly understand how the mind works, and how ignorance can be overcome. And then at the same time, as we are out and about, we need to be on the lookout for the negative survival type instincts, which we talked about in one of the earlier classes. The tendency to be, our tendency to be suspicious and to try to second guess, other people's intentions. Even though somebody might seem like they're trying to help us, in a very sincere and honest, open manner, then, sometimes if it's a complete stranger, I think it happens more often with strangers, in the back of your mind, you might think, why is this person, offering me this? Why are they saying such nice things to me all of a sudden, right? There's always there may be this sneaky tendency to kind of think, I wonder if there's an ulterior motive there or not. So that's just sort of an instinctive kind of survival type thought. So, on the one hand, we don't want to be too naive, like a child who's being lured, into danger by somebody. But on the other hand, we don't want to be to give in to that suspicion, just without thinking about it, right? If we just are always too suspicious, then we've lost that opportunity to connect with others, right? So, prayer alone is not enough, right? Prayer alone, saying, "Oh, I hope the Buddhas will help me, and I hope the Buddhas will help me overcome my anger and help me get rid of my, paranoia," right? That's not going to be able to help us change our minds in any substantial way. We have to, and we all know that, right? We need to instead take responsibility for the condition of our own, mental health, right? We need to be able to take back control over our own of our own minds. And so we want to take a strong stand with regard to what's going on, upstairs, right? We don't want to allow ourselves to just um, give way to this sort of continuous random. It always seems really random. This random stream of thoughts. It often feels, at least in my case, that I'm on autopilot and I'm just going about my day with all these thoughts just sort of running around without any particular rhyme or reason. And, instead, we have to be, more intentional, more focused, um, more aware of, we have to be, like the traffic cop, directing the traffic, making sure that, we're distinguishing right from wrong and doing things in a way that's, virtuous and not just random. Um, and so then again, bringing the way of thinking about this uh, in line with this understanding of emptiness, then we can, remind ourselves again that we exist as, as a conventionally existent, person, right? And yet this, this is what's so interesting, I think, about the Buddhist teachings, right? So on the one hand, we're saying that, I exist as a conventionally existent person. I have, a merely labeled existence, right? I'm not in any way, a permanent, inherently existent being, divorced from all causes and conditions, right? So this merely labeled self must take responsibility for eradicating the merely labeled ignorance and merely labeled negative emotions in order to give rise to merely labeled love and compassion for the benefit of merely labeled sentient beings by myself alone, right? So, if, at the end of many of the FPMT, Lama Zopa Rinpoche's um, prayers, there's always this difficult to read, difficult to understand um, uh, dedication, right? That reads something like that, something along those lines, that the I who's lacks inherent existence is dedicating this virtue that is the lacks inherent existence for the benefit of sentient beings who lack inherent existence, right? And then it just goes on and on and on and on. And, it's kind of hard to understand. But I think it's very, very important because that's really, the challenge in being able to understand ourselves and how we relate to these emotions and where we're trying to go with this all, right?
Ani, would you say that's true also for confessions? Like when we confess our wrong actions as merely labeled non self-existent as well, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It seems almost like kind of ironic in a way I don't think that's the right word, but it's the perspective that we need to bear in mind.
But it sometimes seems like we don't have to take responsibility. So that's where it gets confusing. It's like we do have to take response. You said something very interesting.
Yeah,
You said
yeah.
the merely labeled self must take responsibility for the merely labeled, you know, virtuous or non-virtuous actions.
Uh-huh.
And
Right.
it's confusing sometimes to me. I don't know about other people when I say, well, if it's merely labeled, it's not, why do I have to take responsibility for it?
Mm.
It's not really me. And then also the question is like, did I really, do you take responsibility for something which was caused because you couldn't have done it otherwise? It was caused. So how can you take responsibility for something which you had no ability to do otherwise because the causes and conditions were in place, the karma was in place. It's not like you could have done otherwise. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, you have to at the same time take responsibility for your contribution to the karma, right?
Well, yeah. So you have to have the volition to wish, but even volition is caused, right? So it's
Mhm.
almost like you could not have done it. It couldn't have been otherwise, really.
That's a tricky one. You got to be careful on that one, right? Because no
Yeah.
one
Like
forces your
how do we?
hand, right?
So how do we resolve that? That sounds like a very complicated cop out, which could lead to disaster.
Right. Yeah, I think you have to be very careful, right? Because somewhere, karma is so complicated and there's so many lifetimes, right? Somewhere in there you did something to cause the karma to ripen, in this lifetime, whether positive or negative, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Thanks. Yeah.
good point though. Good point.
Can I ask something along with what Richard just said? Like,
Please. Hi, Janet.
hi, Hanila, how are you? Uh,
Good.
so I understand what he's saying about like this nothing's inherent, this not inherently existent self and others beings. But is it the mind stream, like the subtle mind that goes from life to life that still carries the imprints of these things? And that's why we have to be careful?
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've heard that even karma is empty of inherent existence, but it still leaves its stains or imprints or something. Is that,
Yeah.
Richard, what do you
Things, even emptiness is empty of inherent existence.
think?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Like,
what
okay,
I mean.
without wasting a lot of time going into this in too much depth, you have to be warned not to think, don't have volition. You have to say, well, I have to have volition to try to do the best I can for my future rebirth or for that person who's not me, someone else that will be my mind stream in the next rebirth.
It will
But
be
you also,
a mind stream.
yeah, a mind stream, right. But not a self-existent mind stream,
Right.
not a, it's merely labeled mind stream, but also to do harmful actions in this lifetime to other people, to hurt, you know, a good nun who's giving us good teaching. You don't want to do a negative action and say a rude word or harsh words or anything like that, like I did the other night by accident. But the other thing is like you think, okay, well, watch out for that, but you're going to watch out for that for the reasons you just listed, which were earlier, which the Dalai Lama has said that this mind and this positive way of seeing this clear light uh, ability to see things free from ignorance and
Uh-huh.
to be able to use reason and to analyze that sort of inherent it's not inherent, it's not self-existence, but it is going to grow, it is going to lead to more positive. And so you cannot, I think it's almost like predetermined that you will eventually realize the things that are causing negative karmic seeds are your actions. And so it's almost as if without a choice, you're going to cease doing things ignorantly and negatively because it's inevitable. You're going to see that eventually, given enough mistakes, you're going to see. And you said this interesting thing. You said that the Dalai Lama said that non-virtuous emotions are temporary And here's the catch, which is just beautiful, I think, and it sort of like saves us. Virtuous emotions, this is what you said, right? You're reading from the text.
The
Virtuous
opposite.
emotions based on accurate perceptions can be continually advanced, and we do not need continued effort to cultivate them. And that's like good news.
It is, right? They'll expand limitlessly with very little effort. They just keep going.
But through inference and deep logical analysis, you have to say, well, you don't have a choice. You're going to start to do virtuous things. They're going to start to keep going. Just because non-virtuous things are not continuous and they will end, virtuous things can build on each other. It's almost like inevitable that eventually, by cause and effect, it's going to be.
I see what you're saying.
Going to become. The other thing that's inevitable is that it's not self-existent. This thing you call volition, it's one of the 5 omnipresent mental factors called volition, right? Or intention, let's say, or something like that, right? That is not something you really have control over, because whatever you intend to do must happen. You cannot do otherwise. You don't have free will to control it, because the causes and conditions are in place. The karmic seeds are in place. Karmic conditions are in place. So you cannot do otherwise.
I wouldn't go that far. I think you're going a little too far there on the lack of free will and shirking your responsibilities there.
Absolutely. So on a shallow investigation, that's what we'll say. But if you really go deeply into it, you have to like determine whether or not you believe that you actually could have done otherwise.
Yeah. Oh, you mean like in any given situation?
Yeah, because from countless moments of time without beginning, of causes and conditions, and not millions, zillions, like countless, meaning countless input parameters to every moment, right? Countless input parameters, not only in your own mind, but all the minds that are interacting and collective karma and everything else, right? If you had a supercomputer intelligent enough and large enough, you could predict it. If it's predictable, like it could not be otherwise. If it can't be otherwise, how can you claim responsibility? There's no free will. That's the determinism argument. It was presented by Aristotle. It was presented by no, seriously.
He was not a Buddhist.
I know he was not exactly. He was not a Buddhist. It was presented by Baron Dolbach in Paris. It was presented by Benjamin Franklin. Even this idea of determinism, everything is predetermined, is part of the Buddhist idea of pre-existent, like everything is
Where'd you come up with this, dude?
What about impermanence, though?
Well, that's it. Impermanence is dependent upon previous causes and conditions. Anything that's functioning.
Even what you're describing is being determined.
You always have a choice. I mean, look, Richard, if you have a choice between killing somebody, to have dinner, or not killing an animal to have dinner, that's a choice that you can make. That's not predetermined, right?
Okay, so it will be experienced by you as volition, as intention, right? But you could not have intended otherwise, because the causes and conditions for that intention were already in place, and that intention was not inherently self-existent. It is dependent, and it's dependent upon what? Your previous moment of mind, which is already in place. By the time you're thinking you have volition, the previous moment of mind is past. So you cannot do otherwise.
I don't agree.
I think you lost me on this one.
I know. Most people do not like the determinist argument, but logically it's infallible. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking.
I like to think that I have volition.
If you go deeper into it, you could spend your whole life doing a PhD on it. You may not come up with a solution that satisfies you, but it's worth thinking about. It's part of the predeterminism, is part of the cause and conditioning. And so to say that things are merely labeled, and to say that things must be caused, is to say that if they must be caused already, the cause is in the past. The current moment is dependent upon previous causes and conditions and karmic seeds arising. Therefore, you can't do
Doesn't
otherwise
mean
in
you
this
can't
moment.
change it, that you don't have a choice as to how to determine your next moment.
Well,
I
this
thought that
moment,
was the reason why we're practicing in the first place, so that we could be aware in the moment and so that we could potentially stop ourselves from doing those bad things. I thought that was the
Repeating it,
whole,
yeah. Yeah,
I
the
thought
whole
that was
Yes.
the whole point of practicing.
absolutely correct. And when you analyze what you just said, the reason you're choosing to practice is already in place. And your practicing is already in place, and it is leading to what what Annie just said, which is what the Dalai Lama said, which is, virtuous emotions based on accurate perceptions will continually be advanced. So that's the good news. It's almost as if once you catch on to this, you have no choice to have the volition to wish to do virtuous actions, to have positive karmic outcomes. So it's almost like eventually you will become enlightened. It may take forever, it may take 300 countless eons, but or 3 countless eons or something. But yeah, so the whole question of whether you have free will to do it is the question you have to examine. And I don't think anyone's resolved that, but there are people who do believe in free will, and people who believe in determinism, and they're much more intelligent than I am, and they've been
Interesting.
they've written about it. Yeah.
Okay, so that's something for further study. We can do that during the break. Okay, so just to continue here with the advice. So we're talking about making, a deliberate effort to be happy. Using, again, this is a little bit of a review, a combination of the analytical reasoning, including taking as our meditation object the disadvantages of experiencing negative emotions and understanding in greater detail the mind and the mental factors. And then engaging in mind training meditation, the Losang meditation, using texts such as those found in the book of Kadam, which Geshe Darge has been teaching from. And then also maybe one of the third element might be practicing and realizing shamatha, calm abiding, and Mahamudra practices, of course, are also helpful. All of that, kind of goes together. So using those, techniques, I mean, that seems to be like an oversimplistic way of presenting, the different avenues of practice that are going to be necessary in order to overcome ignorance. But going back to the text, then one of the topics that the Dalai Lama and Venerable Thupten Trudren discusses, how do we handle situations of disagreement and conflict. And so they offer a quote that says, "There are, O monastics, these 6 roots of disputes." What 6? Here, a monastic is, number 1, angry and vengeful, or number 2, contemptuous and domineering, or 3, envious and miserly, or 4, deceitful and hypocritical, or 5, he has evil desires and wrong views, or 6, he adheres to his own views, holding to them tenaciously and relinquishing them with difficulty. So maybe we can take a minute and just reflect on these 6 roots of dispute, and just think, for a moment, how does this, apply to me? Have I ever been, in such a situation? And how do these negative states of mind give rise to, feelings of suffering? So The first is feeling angry and vengeful. So we'll go through each of these and we can just spend a few minutes, just whatever comes up, try to identify with this feeling and think, making the determination that, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to not experience this kind of disturbing emotion. And questioning, how and why does this occur, and what kind of suffering, do I experience in relation to it. So feeling angry and vengeful. The next one is contemptuous and domineering. Meaning, looking down on somebody else, thinking that you're better than somebody else. And domineering, meaning, trying to control, maybe micromanage a situation. And the third one is envious and miserly. Again, trying to relate this to our own lives, our own personal experience. Think of situations where you have been overcome by strong envy, where you've wanted something that somebody else has. And then miserly, maybe you have something, but you don't want to give it away. You don't want to share. The fourth root of dispute is being deceitful and hypocritical. So maybe lying about something. Saying that you can do something when you can't, something like that. And the next root of dispute is having evil desires and wrong views. Or, and then the sixth and final one is adhering to your own views, holding to them tenaciously and relinquishing them with difficulty. So that's, like stubbornly insisting that you're right and that everybody else is wrong. Okay, so that's not a real pleasant place to be, is it? Right? I mean, I hope you had a chance to just reflect and some experiences from your own life, and it can be pretty disturbing, at least for me, right? I mean, I physically, it's upsetting, emotionally, it's upsetting, the whole 9 yards. And so, what's the antidote, right? I mean, I think it's good to take a moment to reflect on, points such as those, because recalling that experience, bringing it up fresh, in the mind, is a good reminder that we need to consciously practice the antidote, right? That we don't want to be stuck in that type of suffering. And so we should practice the antidote. And that involves doing things such as, practicing the ability to express positive, thoughts, such as, true gratitude, to be able to verbalize that, to really be able to say that to somebody, to express our appreciation, to express, give thanks, to praise people, to call out their good qualities, with a sincere heart, and to show genuine concern for someone else's, well-being, to be there, to offer comfort, to offer assistance, right? So all of those practices help us overcome, our self-cherishing tendencies, our self-cherishing thoughts, and the related suffering that they cause. Any comments or advice that you'd like to share before we move on?
Well, one question, you used a cool term. I think you meant for each one. I think you called it a root of dispute, that's the first time I've heard that. That's a really great expression. Do you want to just sort of
Yeah, that's
tell us a little
right
bit
out
about
of,
what does that mean exactly? Root of dispute. So you listed all these 6 things, right? They're the cause of disputations, I guess, or conflict with
yeah,
others.
yeah, cause of conflict with others. Yeah. So in the chapter, the authors go through and explain each of these in greater detail, but it's that type of attitude that would give rise to, a dispute with anybody who is in that state of mind, right? If you're dealing with somebody who's full of anger and revenge, that's going to cause a dispute for sure. Right?
Yeah, definitely. And the idea that it's the root of the dispute. So the dispute, it's really the result, right? And it's so cool. It's sort of so like ignorance as a root, that we cut off the root of ignorance, and that will get rid of the 3 poisons or all the poisons or all the disturbing mental formations, emotions or something.
Yeah.
Is kind of contained in that term, root of dispute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of
Thanks.
roots. Anybody else? Any other comments or? All right. So we're going to move on to another section of the chapter, and I'm doing this a little bit out of order. One of the other sections is called Working with Fear and Developing Courage. And so in the last class, we talked about ignorant fear, versus a wisdom-based fear, right? Like healthy fear, wisdom fear would be like a realistic fear that helps to keep us alive, versus the ignorant fear, which is a fear that's the result of the sort of superstitious, mistaken, self-cherishing mind. So I wanted to take a step back and just go over fear from the Western psychological perspective. And this is just to kind of remind us And then we'll look at again at the Buddhist approach. So this is from a blog article by a woman named Nikki Tudge. And this was actually a dog training pet professional guild article, but it's to help shelter workers, who are under tremendous stress, and helping them overcome their anxiety. So she talks about anxiety, actually, and points out that there are many, many different kinds of anxiety, and anxiety can manifest in many, many different ways. There are many symptoms, everything from sort of a generalized anxiety disorder to social anxiety, to panic disorders, to having specific phobias, and even, obsessive compulsive disorders. And so some of the most common physical symptoms are having a rapid heartbeat, many different kinds of persistent headaches, trembling and shaking, having digestive discomfort or digestive disorders, and panic attacks. And so the solutions that she offers to help, manage and ideally, overcome anxiety, some of her ideas are to, again, not very surprising, but good to repeat, to build a supportive community and to connect with others, to practice slow breathing, meditation, to remain, positive in our outlook, to focus on the positive in the environment and in our lives. And then also she makes a big point of setting achievable, realistic goals, and making those goals attainable, like baby stepping, a series of goals, as a way of offering, structure that can help prevent, anxiety, as a sort of generalized panic type anxiety, from overcoming us. So, just to say that that's real, right? Anxiety, it really exists. And I think to a certain extent, we've all fallen victim to, anxiety. We've all experienced anxiety in some form or another, right? And so I found a quote. This is actually from the Lamrim Year, the one by Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the Lamrim Year, on page 285. There's a beautiful quote about how to overcome, this feeling of self-cherishing, which gives rise to fear and worry and anxiety. So I thought there was, a connection here. So I will read the quote. It says, "When we cherish ourselves and think only of ourselves, how can I be happy? How can I be free of problems? Then there is no happiness in our heart. There's only fear and worry. We see only problems and our mind is not relaxed. But in the next moment, when we change our object of concern to another sentient being, even if it's only one sentient being, suddenly our heart is released from self-cherishing, like limbs released from chains. As soon as our object of concern changes from ourselves to someone else, our heart is released from the bondage of the self-cherishing thought. As soon as we change the object of our cherishing, there is suddenly peace in the very depths of our heart. At the very moment our mind changes from self-cherishing to cherishing others, there is liberation, freedom from the tight bondage of selfishness." And so how do we, develop courage? Courage being the antidote to fear. Then I found this one beautiful sentence, that's in the whole long chapter, chapter 3, in this section. And I wanted to, read this, share this thought. And then the rest of today's presentation and the time that we have remaining is I'm going to go through each of these points that His Holiness raises. And that'll be the focus of the rest of the talk, even though the chapter is quite a bit longer. You can read that, on your own. So the sentence says, one single practice or method alone cannot develop courage. It requires contemplation of several topics over a period of time. And these topics include, and I'll read them all through, and then we'll go through each one point by point. The preciousness of our human life, right? The potential of ourselves and all others to become fully awakened Buddhas, the compassionate, awakening activities of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the life stories of great masters, the kindness we have received from all sentient beings, and finally, love, compassion, and taking others' suffering and giving them our happiness. These will uplift and balance the mind so that we then view situations from a broad perspective. So these really are, sort of the essential meditation topics for being able to be happier, right? So we'll go through each of these, and then actually we're going to close with the meditation on the 7-point mind training. Okay. So the first one, and these are just, topics that we're familiar with, right? There's nothing super surprising here. Preciousness of our human life, then that's, straight out of the Lamrim, the small scope. So although we're in samsara now, and samsara is in the nature of suffering, because, we're human beings in the present lifetime, then we have the intelligence, the physical body, everything that we need in order to be able to create the causes to cut the root of suffering forever. So we've met the Dharma, we have unbelievable teachers. We have all the resources that we need to be able to study and practice. We live in a supportive community and an environment. And so we have no excuse, right? Every action of our body, speech, and mind, all of those, we know we have the choice, to dedicate, to devote to Dharma, right? Every minute is precious. We don't know when our lives will end. And so we need to really make this our life's work. So that's the preciousness of our human life. And then the next topic was the potential of ourselves and all others to become fully awakened Buddhas. And so that's, a slightly more difficult thought to become comfortable with, right? And so, when we think that everybody, me, myself, that everybody, who's here today on our Zoom call, and as well as, all of your relatives, all of your friends, your neighbors, everybody, our enemies, everybody has the same Buddha nature. We all have minds that we can purify of negative emotions and karma, right? And so, we can ask ourselves on a day-to-day level, what's holding us back? I'll ask myself that. What's holding me back from being able to realize, Buddhahood, the highest potential? Is it my laziness? Is it my pride? What's the problem here? Is it a lack of faith, a lack of conviction that Buddhahood, exists, and that I have that ability to realize it? I don't know. And so you might recall in, I think it was the second class, we talked a lot about joyous perseverance, and I shared several quotes about how we should never be discouraged about, how difficult the Bodhisattva's way of life, seems to be. And that we should, never give up, never be discouraged as we learn about what it's going to take. And instead, we should be inspired as we learn and see other spiritual practitioners and their attempts, their successes, their realizations and attainments, and generate the aspiration that we too will be able to continue, on our spiritual journey. And the next meditation topic is the compassionate awakening activities of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So how do the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas assist us, primarily? Well, it's by teaching, right? Teaching us the difference between right and wrong. We think about the teachings on morality and ethics, which we've talked about quite a bit, right? So it's how not to fall into the lower realms, right? How to practice the 6 perfections, right? How to do everything possible to help others to the greatest extent that we can. How can we make somebody else's life just a little bit better? And not just, making this life more comfortable, but instead, thinking, how can I help this person attain enlightenment, in the future? Having that big picture perspective. So important. And so, we can ask ourselves, all right, well, how do we connect with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, right? Because we can't directly see the Buddhas, right? And so we have to remind ourselves that, we can think of our spiritual masters, of our gurus, our teachers, as being inseparable from the Buddhas. Right? And so we request them to come and stay, with us, not just during our formal meditation session, like when we're doing our pujas or meditation, but all the time. And Alexander Berzin, in his talk about this is about the 6 preparatory practices before meditation. This was in a talk about the 7 limb prayer. He talks about what it really means when we say, bless me, right? In all the prayers it says, please bless me to do this, bless me, bless me, bless me. So he explains that when we say bless me, what it really means is we're asking for inspiration, right? We're asking for help he's saying, inspire me, uplift me, brighten me. These are his words. Okay. So the Tibetan word jinlap, and which is translated as bless me, he's saying that, it actually means more like inspire me, uplift me, brighten me. And so he says, the Buddhas are inspiring because of their enlightening activity. Their enlightening activity is actually an enlightening influence. The texts always describe that the Buddhas don't have to do anything. Just their very way of being inspires and uplifts everyone. So it's this effortless influence, from on the part of the Buddha that benefits, us. And he says, so it's not that we have to request it, because if we didn't request it, a Buddha would not exert this enlightening influence. He says the enlightening influence of a Buddha is like the sun. It's shining all the time. It's that by making a request, we're opening up ourselves to receiving that enlightening influence. And so he says, sometimes we hear that you have to request a teacher to teach, right? If you don't request the teacher to teach, he's not going to teach, or she's not going to teach. But he says, to clarify that, a teacher is always teaching. Buddha is always exerting this enlightening influence. Right? The sun is always shining, but we won't receive that teaching unless we, in a sense, request. So open up. Right? So that's making requests. It's really more an internal thing. It's almost like inspire me, enlighten me, brighten me up. But you're talking to yourself in the sense of we have to become the vessels or the receptacles for that teaching. So it's almost like, you're telling yourself to open up, to become suitable to receive the teachings. Yeah? Okay. So that was how to meditate on this idea of compassionate awakening activities of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And the next point to think about is the life stories of great masters. And so here we can reflect on the connection that we have with our gurus in this lifetime. Think of the hardships that they experienced. Think of the simplicity of their lifestyles, and rejoice in the brilliance of their many, many, many achievements, and kindness. And the last 2 points, the kindness we have received from all sentient beings, and the love, compassion, and taking others' suffering and giving them our happiness. So I've sort of I'm combining those two. And I have a quote from, so here this is talking about really the mind of enlightenment, right? Cultivating bodhicitta, the bodhicitta mind. And so by being able to do this, practice this, then life becomes easier, because, you're easier to be with. There's less drama, right? You're creating less drama. You're no longer an adrenaline addict. You're finding happiness by relinquishing self-cherishing, right? Just as, we have been talking about. When we turn towards helping others without, selfish attachment, without pride, without contempt, then our inner and outer obstacles are gradually eliminated. And then resources that you need for your Dharma practice, start to flow towards you effortlessly, so that you can sustain and continue your practice. And then another quote from Lama Yeshe's, I think it was Lama Yeshe, maybe this is Lama Zopa, also from the Lam Rim Year publication. A further benefit of bodhicitta is that we cannot be harmed by either internal disturbances, such as distractions, or external harms, such as other humans and non-humans. It's said in the teachings that the universal kings, the extremely rich and powerful kings of the gods, have to have many protectors to guard them while they're sleeping. But a bodhisattva naturally has twice as many protectors, protecting them day and night, keeping them safe from spirits and other distractions. This is not something they aim for, but just a byproduct of attaining bodhicitta. When a bodhisattva comes to a place, even one made terrible by malevolent spirits, that place can be transformed, made very quiet and tranquil, losing its violent atmosphere. The droughts, famines, and catastrophes that occur because of the spirits are stopped by the bodhisattva's influence. Walking through a forest full of dangers, such as tigers or poisonous snakes, a bodhisattva is protected by the precious thought of bodhicitta, and the wild creatures become subdued. Okay, so then there's another section. I can't remember if this is actually the last section in the chapter or not, but there's one called Cultivating Love and Compassion. And it's a very beautiful section, a very beautiful description. And it really comes down to many of the same points that are contained in the 7-point cause and effect meditation. So I thought that maybe we would just go through that a little bit. So this is taken from Pabonka Rinpoche's book, Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, starting on page 569. So I don't know if we'll have time to go through all of it, but maybe we'll start. So the foundation before doing this particular meditation, of course, is generating a sense of equanimity. Right? And so taking a minute to open our hearts, open our minds to include all living beings. Thinking of all the forms of existence and the different kinds of relationships that we have with others. Trying to think of specific individuals that we would like to include in this meditation. This can be people or living beings towards whom we have feelings of, affection or indifference or animosity, bringing them all into our circle, as well as thinking from their side, we're including people who may have affectionate thoughts towards us, may have indifferent thoughts towards us, may have hostile thoughts towards us. So thinking of relationships from both aspects, both perspectives, that allows us to increase the number of beings that we would otherwise, well, that we can include. And then the first point is all sentient beings have been your mother. So just as our mental continuum is composed of a stream of moments of consciousness that has no beginning, and this extremely subtle mind takes rebirth over and over again, and it comes into existence through rebirth from parents, right? We can think of our current mother thinking that our current existence is just a manifestation of previous moment of consciousness that's been carried forth. I think that there are countless mothers. We've had countless mothers in all different types of existence. Thinking of all the different sentient beings in the 6 realms of samsaric existence. So not just the human beings, but the animals and the hungry ghosts and the hell beings and the gods and the demigods. We've been through all of these different rebirths many, 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 many times. And so have our friends. So have our families. So have the people to whom we're strangers, as well as our enemies. And then remembering the kindness of our friends, our loved ones, our strangers and enemies, thinking that our mother's kindness is what has kept us, alive. There's been no end to her sacrifices. Likewise, all sentient beings have shown us the same concern for our well-being that our mothers have in this life and in all previous lives. We've been the recipient of their kindness. And then naturally, we wish to repay their kindness. So it's as though we saw our mother and she's blind and she's heading towards an abyss and there's nobody to guide her and her mind is filled with crazy thoughts. Abonka Rinpoche says, if she cannot turn to her child for help, to whom can she turn? If the child will not save its mother, Whom will it save? We've met the Dharma, whereas others have not. They can't discriminate between right and wrong. They don't know any better. And so we're responsible for being able to repay the kindness of others because we have studied the Dharma, because we do know the difference between virtuous and non-virtuous actions. We understand the workings of karma. We understand the root afflictions, etc. And so we can offer the temporary relief, the alleviation of suffering by repaying their kindness, by offering food and clothing and shelter and affection. And we can do even better because we can offer the pure nourishment of the Dharma. And then the fourth point is cultivating loving kindness, or Pabonka Rinpoche calls this meditating on the love that comes from the force of attraction. So this is the result of the meditating on the previous 3 points. So all mothers of being sentient beings are your mother, remembering their kindness and repaying their kindness. And so here's the sincere wish that all sentient beings may have happiness. The 5th point is cultivating great compassion. And so in Pabonka Rinpoche's description of this meditation, he goes through a very graphic, very explicit explanation of a sheep being slaughtered by a butcher. And he uses that as an example of thinking that the sheep is just like, our own mother. And so all sentient beings, including ourselves, have experienced this kind of horrific suffering, not just once, but many, many times, and will continue to experience this suffering in the future. Or even worse, could be reborn in a lower realm. And so we should think of the suffering of all beings, at all times throughout the day. And not only that, we should take personal responsibility for being able to put an end to that suffering. Putting an end to suffering that is unnecessary in a sense. It's unnecessary. And so the 6th point then is that special attitude of personal responsibility or altruism. Again, from Lam Yer, we must free all sentient beings from all the sufferings that they are experiencing and place them in the purest happiness of enlightenment. With loving kindness and great compassion, we determine we will do this with a special attitude. We take this one step further by determining that we will do this by ourselves alone. Sorry. My computer is jumping around. It's now developed a life of its own. Okay. It's the extra thought, voluntarily taking the full responsibility for each and every sentient being's happiness and leading them from suffering to the state of the omniscient mind. That extra phrase, by myself alone, is so important. We should always remember that. Then the last point is developing bodhicitta. The path to enlightenment has three main levels. The first leads us to upper rebirths, but not out of cyclic existence. From here, the help we can give others is minimal. The second level is for those who seek complete liberation from cyclic existence, mainly out of concern for their own problems. Even though such practitioners transcend their ego, the help they can give others is still quite limited. They can't help all other sentient beings. Only fully enlightened beings can help all sentient beings. If that's what we want to do, that's the goal we have to reach, and that's where the third or highest level of the path leads. So this intention is bodhicitta, when the two thoughts, attaining enlightenment and others' welfare, come together simultaneously in one mind. That's bodhicitta. Okay. So that brings us to the end of this class. Next week is the Georgia Puja. And then the week after that is the class on the introduction to debate, which will be presented by Venerable Losang Dunya. And I also wanted to just mention that Losang Dunya has a center in Scotland, Connecticut, just down the road. But he's offering, it's called the Forest of Wisdom. He's offering a online course. It's actually in person and online, but primarily online, from 10 to 11 on Saturdays from December 7th to January 25th. And the topic is Buddhist Psychology 101. And it's being taught by Losang Dunya himself, as well as a Geshe-ma Tenzin Ladrun. So she's one of the first Geshe-mas. And a Dr. Puja Dabral, who is also a nun in the Buddhist tradition. And so she's the professor of Buddhist studies at Nalanda University in India. So the three of them will be offering this course on Buddhist psychology. So if you're interested in attending it, I'm going to sign up because it really sounds fascinating. Then check out the website, forestofwisdom.love. Okay. Are there any other anything that you would like to share, or any questions?
Just, I want to say thank you, Anila. This was a great class. But that passage about that I alone will do something, to help everybody. To me, it's like, well, what about interdependence? I don't know how we can say we can do it alone.
Is that a question or a comment?
Yeah, I kind of want to know your thoughts on that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the quote is saying that we can't wait for somebody else to do it, right? Our resolution of being of taking the bodhisattva vows, right, or even just aspiring to take the bodhisattva vows, is all about saying, this is me, this is what I'm going to do, this is what makes life meaningful. And it's only through the efforts of, like the expression, it takes a village, right, to be able to be a supportive community, to help others, right? That we're all so intricately, our lives are so intricately related, so interdependent. And if everybody has that same, attitude of in a very, altruistic manner, caring for others, then the world will be a better place.
It sure would. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, just just to take that idea Janet just asked about a little further. So this idea of not waiting for someone else to become enlightened to free all our mothers that would be sort of shirking the hard work or shirking the responsibility. And I guess that would close our own minds to our own ability to get rid of our own self-cherishing and instead start cherishing others, but also with slow our own ability to become enlightened, as I guess if we had that.
Why does he do this? Fucking
Oh.
ridiculous.
Yo, Raman, I think your
You're
mic
not
is
the
on.
teacher of the fucking.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the idea, I've always agreed with Janice. I've always thought, well, we're all in this together. Like, can one person do it? I guess we could. One person could do it if everyone else wasn't trying to, but if everyone else was trying to as well, it would be even better, I guess. I don't know.
I guess I think it's like it's independence on the Buddha. You know, the Buddha. We couldn't do this alone without the help of our teachers and all of this to
Absolutely.
kind of.
Yeah.
So I think I'm probably just taking it way too literally. I don't think it literally means, oh, I'm the sole savior of the world here.
Right.
It's,
Right.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. And I see where you're coming from. Yeah. Good clarification. Yeah.
All right.
And also relying on the guru and relying on the Buddha is part of our method of achieving whatever it takes to get closer to Buddhahood, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Fumbling around in samsara. Need their guidance.
I guess we don't have time to talk right now, but I do have a question, but I think maybe better not ask it.
I'm
Okay.
gonna sign off myself, but
Okay.
could stay
Yeah.
on. But
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we dedicate all of the merit from the series of classes to our teachers and to the continuation of the Dharma. And may we all do our best to be able to practice the Dharma all the time. All right. Good night. Thank you very much.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.